at that time, I'd switched from my Oregon prep center to a prep center over in New Hampshire, from a recommendation of another seller, and it was going pretty well. And, the prep center started saying, "Hey, can you help, help us get some customers?" So, I started helping promote them a little bit. And a lot of our, flip group, people that were in the flip group were, sending stuff to this prep center. And all of a sudden, the prep center stopped answering the phones and shipment stopped going out. And that was a bit of a, oh boy, what's going on?
Hey everybody, how's it going? Switching up a bit today and interviewing my co-host Jeff. A lot of people have recently learned of his name, and many of you now know that he's hit 25 million annually, and that puts him at an 8-figure seller a year and 9 figures lifetime. Jeff, give us a story of your road to 25 million.
All right, well, I guess I'll start with how it all got started. I was working a day job. My wife was 9 months pregnant. And I had a little 18 months, I guess he was about 20 months at home. And, I worked a corporate job. It took me about hour and a half every day to get into it. And then, I'd work. Essentially, I'd leave. If I was lucky, I'd wake up, say, good morning to my little one. And then I'd head into the office, and then I'd try to get home for dinner by like 6:30 or 7. Usually, out of the house for 12 plus hours a day. Come home, be able to eat a quick dinner and put him to bed. And that was, the life, at least Monday through Friday. And, at that point in time, I was, I spent a lot of time during my lunch hours, even at night, researching, financial, how to become financially independent and retire early. That was a big, thing at those days when I was grinding, 12 hours. Now, really, I was working 8 to 9 hours and then commuting 3 hours a day with, round trip. But you spend a lot of time figuring out, okay, like what, how do I don't want to spend, my life, working in a day job where I'm gone 12 hours a day. I can't see my kids, can't see my wife, don't have time to, coach my kids' sports, or at this point, obviously, I wasn't there, but you have that ability. So, so I was doing that grind while I was trying to research. I was probably the last person on Earth, or I shouldn't say Earth, but one of the last people. I was certainly one of the last people in my town that didn't have a smartphone because, I didn't want to spend the money. I wanted to save the money because I didn't want to be, wasting money on something like that when I could, save that money to work towards retirement. I was, very big into, Mr. Money Mustache is one of the guys that's like a big guy in that topic. And there's different ways to achieve FIRE. And he was very big on, massive, saving large percentages of your income and, what's the word I'm looking for? Cutting your expenses and, and saving a large percentage of your income. So I had massive spreadsheets of all the different goals and methods of like how I could get there. And, at that point I wasn't, I was working the day job, and I, to take a step back. I used to, when my first job, my wife got married. I got home from the job. I was on the road for 2 months straight. I traveled all the time, 100 nights a year. So, I was a traveling consultant, and I did that for 5 years. And then I went and essentially did that same work internally, where I, was traveling around for our company, going to our different divisions and doing various compliance works as, sort of as a front end compliance guy. So, traveling all the time. And I got really big into collecting points so that I could travel for free. My wife and I used to go, we'd do like, 2-week trips in Europe, like every summer, go to Hawaii. And everybody was like, she'd get a lot of grief from some of her like coworkers of like, you guys are so rich, it must be nice. We never paid a dime for it. I mean, neither of us even had smartphones. Like everybody was, in smartphones. We're still sitting there with our Nokias, like flip phones or what. Actually, I guess it wasn't Nokia. It must have been flip phones. we couldn't even we'd lug big cameras around to the trips we would take because we didn't have the smartphone to take the picture. Um, but we found this way of, hey, we could use these points to travel all over the place. And so while we doing that, combined with the daily grind of the job, I started to read blogs of how you can what's the word I'm looking for? Get more points for free. So obviously I got them from traveling, but now you can sign up for credit cards. You can there's this one deal. I didn't get into it very hard, but there was a deal where these hardcore like travel hackers would buy dollar coins from the U.S. Mint because you could buy them. And I don't think they were charging credit card transaction fees, or if it was very small. So you would buy boatloads of gold coins from the U.S. Mint. They'd ship them to your house. And then the goal was obviously to get them in circulation, but these people would just then carry them and take them to the bank.
Yeah.
And just, buy it. I forget. There's,
They
it's a while ago.
keep paying off the cards, taking the points from the cards, but just depositing the
Yeah.
coins.
Yeah, I mean, all you're doing is you buy $1,000 of gold coins, you go put them in the bank, deposit $1,000, and you use that $1,000 to pay it off, and they were just
That's
doing
funny.
that over and over again. And it's a lot of freaking work to to even get like 20,000 points. But at that point, like, hey, I mean, you can fly, what is it? You can find I think 12,500. I think you can fly within the U.S. and 25,000 might get you to the Caribbean. I forget again. I'm not as big into the travel hacking anymore. But anyway, so people would do that. Yeah, I dabbled with. Yeah, I think I might have bought a few gold coins or whatever, but it was it was not worth the effort. But it was interesting to read on these just different travel blogs. How people are finding ways to earn rewards. And very long-winded answer of how I got into this was, on the travel blogs, I started to read about these guys that were buying high-end electronics. There's a lot of iPads and computers, and buying them and then selling them on Amazon for around break-even prices to earn the rewards points. The electronics category has one of the lower fulfillment fees. I think they're like 8% or something like that. So the electronics you don't need as much markup. Of course, you end up with a lot of returns, but I'm not sure the travel hackers realized that at the time. But it just on paper, hey, let's load up on these electronics. Can sell them. Buy them for 200, sell them for 300. Maybe make a buck or two, but very least I'm earning boatloads of reward points for doing it. So that was my first introduction to sort of selling on Amazon.
And when
And
was this?
this was 2015. It was right around the summer of 2015. I started reading this. And I think there's a lot of guys that were doing it, you know, for frequent miler was one I used to read every day, I believe. And I think I don't know if it was him or somebody he was referencing was starting to do that. And then eventually, one of the blogs actually started about talking about, hey, you can actually make some money doing it. So then I started reading that, and then that's what it sort of brought me down the rabbit hole of I started Googling, selling on Amazon or whatever. And I eventually, found Ryan Grant. He was doing the online selling experiment was the name of his sort of blog. I don't know if it still exists or whatever, but, and, he was, I think, really big into retail arbitrage. And, I remember seeing a post that he'd done $100,000 in sales, like mostly at like buying stuff at Targets and stuff. And I was like, that's insane. Like that's, how is somebody doing that? So, it really started to intrigue my interest at that point in time. God, I'm not even sure I was on Facebook or I was just starting to get on Facebook. I've always been very slow to join the social media scene or whatever, but I must have just joined or I was, yes, because my wife, I think like the first year my son was born, we didn't have it. And then we eventually got it. So I must have been on there, but wasn't really utilizing it. But then I started searching Facebook groups and then found, a couple Facebook groups. And that's where it really started to dive into a little bit more of the networking and being able to see people talk more real time than waiting for a blog post, but having people sort of post. And in particular, there was this Facebook called FBA Masters, and they were doing a lot of Amazon flips. And their admins were posting all this stuff each day, like, "Hey, buy this and flip it." Their whole shtick was, before they went hardcore, like selling different affiliates, they were pushing the flips because they were using affiliate links for
Oh,
when you clicked on the Amazon. So like, don't get any ideas, Joe, for our group, but they were using affiliate links. So they'd say, "Here, buy this, you'll make boatloads of money," and then drop an affiliate link. They
sure.
weren't really disclosing it, but they were, and they made boatloads of money into their account. I don't think they really got any of it, because I think it all got taken away because they were violating various,
Sure.
um, affiliate terms of services that eventually got it taken away. I mean, I don't think you're allowed to promote reselling as it relates to
Right.
terms of services.
How,
But
how are you
anyway,
finding time to do all this? You said you worked the long hours. You didn't see the kids a whole lot. Like, where did this time
yeah.
come
So
from to do
yeah,
this?
I mean, at this point, it was just the research phase. So I would definitely pop in during lunch, and do some research, and then I think I did finally have a smartphone at that point in time, so I could read on my train ride home about it. And then at night, and just really start trying to research it. I'm not, for better or worse, like for me, from the first time I read it to the first product I ordered was probably within 2 weeks. Like, I am not a like, okay, let me analyze this. And some people have trouble taking action. I maybe do it too fast. I'm like, okay, whatever. Let's just I'll figure this out easier if I try it than trying to read it. So I probably spent a couple of weeks at most reading this stuff. And then it was, all right, let's try it. So like, one of the first things I ordered was Amazon flips. And then, Kohl's, I think Kohl's toys clearance or something like that. And then I also started going to Kohl's, and some Walmart, but definitely some Kohl's. You're scanning the clearance items, RA. Um, and whatnot. So those were some of my first orders. Again, my wife was 9 months pregnant. Like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you starting a business, right now? And I'm like, well, this will get us some extra money. And we never thought at that point in time that it would ever turn into anything major. But hey, let's see what we can do. Um,
And that was when she was pregnant with your first kid.
Second.
Second.
So yeah, she was 9 months pregnant with our second one, and our first one was, he was a toddler. I think he was around 20 months or whatever, running around the house. Um, and my wife, I think at that point she might have already started her maternity leave, because she still worked. She had her own career as a speech therapist, um, and she had taken her maternity leave, and I was starting to get into this. Right then. So after after our second was born, and I started to really dive into this, um, I had discovered somewhere pretty early on. I had discovered Sears. One of the blogs that posted that Sears had a deal that it was double. If you got it was Sears and Discover Card. If you got the Discover Card, sign up for Discover Card. And I think Discover Card actually still does this aspect of doubling your first year's cash back. So everything was doubled. And then for Sears, they had 10% cash back for purchase on Sears. But you could actually purchase the credit card on Sears, get that 10%, then utilize that credit card to make a purchase and get that 10% back. And so you were getting 20% for each sort of item you got back, but then they were doubling that on the back end. You had to wait a year for it, but you're doubling it. So you're essentially getting 40% cash back. And then on top of that, Sears just had a very good um, store point reward system, like that you got like 5 to 15% back. Sometimes they run deals that you're getting 20% back in points. They used to always do these like specials, like 100% points back too as well. And at that point, you're getting 100% back in points and 40% back in cash back. It was just
Wow.
it was insane.
Did
So
you find
that's
out
where
about that through the travel stuff and the?
yeah, one of the travel blogs had posted it, and that's where it really, I dabbled with some of those Amazon flips, but the Sears was where I really first started to scale at any level where, I just ordered massive amounts of stuff, and then I'd come home from, when I got home from work, there'd be all these boxes. I'm like, damn, when am I going to prep these things? And um, that was one of our challenges. Again, at this point I had a newborn and a 20-month old, and like, trying to get them to bed, and again, I'm working 7 to 7. How am I going to get this stuff prepped? So it was a challenge. My wife helped when she could, and we started to send some stuff out, but I probably did. I would think I might have done 2 shipments, and then it was just like, found out about prep centers. And I probably always heard about prep centers, but it was finally when the light bulb click was, especially when I was buying, the Sears items. Because with Amazon Flips, you can get tax exempt. And I think I had that set up pretty early, so I wasn't paying tax on that. And same thing with Walmart. But, with Sears, you had to like retroly active, I think, ask for it. They didn't have a front end tax exempt process. So, that's a lot. Yeah. And going on the back end, asking for each order when you're making massive amount of orders always sort of concerned me. And so it was like, man, I could buy all these things, ship to a prep center. And at that point, it was probably $1 a unit to use a prep center. I'm like, okay, like if I'm buying a $20 item, that's $1.40 in tax. I ship it to,
Get it for
I think my
free.
first, yeah, I think my first prep center was in Oregon. It was like, that's free. Like, well, why not? So let's do that. So I signed up for the prep center pretty quickly on, and that really allowed to start to scale, because you could buy in bulk without having to prep. Again, when I was doing the daily grind of working the day job, 9 to 5, which I was more like 7 to 7. Coming home and prepping. And one of the things that I always tried to do since the start of this, right, was, I didn't want it to impact my time with the family. Like, this is part of the thing that I didn't like about my day job. It was just took so much time from the family. So I didn't want to be, okay, all Saturday and Sunday I'm going to be working. From my perspective, it was, I need to work when my kids are sleeping. When my wife's sleeping, work at night, work in the morning. The weekends. Even when we were, doing this, it wasn't working a lot on the weekend, because that was the time to spend together. So, I mean, those first couple of years when I was doing this and my kids weren't sleeping, I'm not sure I got 3 or 4 hours of sleep a night, at best, because there was no time. But it was, it started to take traction. The first full month, I think we did 15,000, 20,000 a month, and it was just, damn, this is, especially back then, the ROI was really good. There wasn't as
Sure.
much competition. Um, and it was, hey, this is, this is doing pretty good. And so, um,
Now, are you financing this all yourself, and then the credit cards, and then just paying off the credit cards?
yeah. So, yeah, I mean, I had a decent credit. I had a good day job. My wife had a job as well. So we had the luxury of, as I said, I was a fire guy, right? I wanted, so I was putting as much, I was being as cheap as I could be. I guess you say frugal, I'd
Yeah,
like to say, but
driving a used car, not
yeah,
spending
exactly.
huge amounts of money.
I paid off um, I paid off my undergraduate degrees with my gambling winnings. And which may be another story. And then I went back for my master's degree. So I had 1 year of student loans, essentially, that I locked in at 1.97%. And then
Wow.
my wife had, I think a couple years of student loans as well. And we also had those locked in pretty low. But outside of that, we were living well below our means and saving as much as we could, because I did not want to be, working a day job until I was 65. So I had some extra funds. And yeah, as you said, just utilizing credit cards to purchase items, and then pay them off before the credit card. If you were able to flip things fast, you were able to flip them before the credit cards came due. Um,
So were you merchant fulfilling a lot at the beginning, or were you sending
mm,
everything in?
no, nope, nope, nope. Everything was going FBA from the start. I in Q4 I dabbled with some merchant fulfilling, but that first year it was all FBA. that was hard enough. Sending to each individual customer, especially around the day job, wasn't something we were interested in doing. So no, we went straight to FBA. And you said, we were probably hovering 15, 20,000 months, those first couple months. And then, December of the first year. Um, and my wife was planning, a 6-month maternity leave. So she was, we started in July. Our second was born in August. So what is that? Well, February might have been February, March, I think was when she was scheduled to go back. And, that first December, we did a little over 40,000, in sales. And, at that point it was, hey, this is, we can make this work. And at that point, we had a, family discussion of what do you want to do? Like, I think this business can, at least supplement your income enough that if you want to stay home, you can stay home. She went to school for 7 years for her career. So she worked, very hard. And that was not because she had to repeat stuff. It's just, she's a therapist that,
Yeah.
took a lot of schooling, and, she had, you know, 2 majors, and then went back for her master's in speech. So like she has a lot of education, well educated, and you want to give that up at least for a short time to be home with the kids. And I know it was a bit of a debate for her, especially because before kids she was like, okay, I'm just gonna take a little time off, and then that's it, I'll just go back in, and whatever, I'll see the kids when I get back. And it was, no, I want to be able to be here with the kids. So she essentially said, we started, she probably was already on maternity leave, or within maternity leave within a few weeks of me starting, and then she never went back. And that was sort of the first of, hey, this can actually be more than just a side hustle that can help me retire early, but this is a side hustle that could actually start to replace, some level of, income. So at that point, we replaced hers, and then it was a matter of, okay, where can we scale this next to?
Now, for a lot of people that are like getting started with this, getting going, or maybe even some veterans that are in this, would that have at all been possible, or a situation that would have been able to happen had you had car payments, had you had credit card debt that you already had you had student loans? Would that have been a possibility to even do that, or is that something that was only made possible because you were frugal?
I mean, I like to use frugal instead of cheap bastard, but I mean, you can make it work either way. But I had the benefit of, I had a well-paying job, and we had the funds to be able to put towards this. So that definitely gave me an advantage, and it gave me the ability to scale quicker. I also had good credit that allowed me to, you know, my parents had got me credit cards since I was in, high school. And, I've used credit cards my whole, since I was 17, to buy things on my own. And so I had more credit than somebody starting. And of course I was starting in my, my 30s, not when I was 15 and 17, like some of these guys that are doing it nowadays. Um, so, um, so I think it's possible, but it definitely gave me an advantage. And also I have admittedly, you know, so I started this in 2015, but I think it was 2023, I sold some college textbooks on Amazon. So because back then they had daily payouts, students for
2003.
2003, when you sold something, you immediately got, um, you know,
Daily
within,
payouts for it.
like each day you could withdraw your funds. So they did away with that at some point. But because of my first sale being in 2003, I'm locked into daily payouts. Grandfathered is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
So I don't have to wait 2 weeks like everybody else. So
Wow.
so I have that huge, so I had the advantage of, yes, I have, I had credit, that an existing credit that allowed me to sort of meet my purchasing needs. I had, funds in the bank to be able to fund this. And then I had daily payouts. So it definitely gave me a little bit of an unfair advantage for those that's starting with, limited capital and, without the credit. But again, I've seen many people do it, ramp up better and faster than me, that we're not in that situation. So it can
I
be
mean,
done.
as far as a business aspect, like any other business, is 30-day pay is not unheard of. So it's like 15 days to get paid out by something really is not that bad. Like
Yeah.
it's really not
No.
horrible when you compare it to any other business model.
Yeah. Well, or even a startup cost for
Yeah.
business. I mean, most startup costs for business are going to what, be 50 grand or something? Like
Yeah,
you
and then
got,
plus all the
yeah,
marketing you have to put into it, where Amazon is
yeah,
doing that for you.
yeah. So there's not too much cost. I mean, I was stupid looking back because I was so, again, frugal, which is again part of the reason I'm good at this stuff. But like, I didn't have a listing software or a, QuickBooks, or I was just doing everything in Google spreadsheets. I didn't have a repricer for the first year or two. Like, I had literally like the $40, expense, and I don't even know what else I had. I don't even know if I had anything at that point in time. I didn't remember how you I don't even remember. I guess I had RevSeller at some point. I mean, I got RevSeller pretty early on. I don't know if it was existed from the start. I don't know what I used before RevSeller, but
Just
um,
Keepa and
yeah, Keepa.
Seller.
Yeah, and back then Keepa was free, and then RevSeller was, it was $100 a year, and I think I might have signed up for an 80. When they had a coupon for $80 a year. So I think those were my big expenses. So
Wow.
it's such a cheap business to start. It takes a little bit more, I think, now, but it's still, again, it's not much and whatnot. So
Now, Keepa originally started for the consumer, right? Not for resellers. Is that kind of what happened?
yeah,
Is
I
that
think
why?
that
Is that
was,
why it was free?
I think, yeah, and I think, yeah, I mean, I think they made money from the companies utilizing it with APIs, right? I honestly don't know, and it might have always had a portion that you paid for the data. I think that's what it was. There was always a portion that you paid for data, but the sales tracking and all that other stuff was free. And then at some point they shifted you can no longer get the sales rank data for free, and they added that. I mean, it's still,
Ah,
relatively cheap compared to, you know, anything else, especially because you know, it's the lifeblood of any sourcing. Like, you can't really do this without Keepa.
sure.
You
So
can,
you're
but
still being careful with all your expenses in the business and in your personal life while you're ramping this all up, and it's 2016 at this point.
yep. After that first Q4, yeah, into 2016. Um,
What did you see in Q4 that, like, I mean, other than obviously you did larger numbers, did you know that you could keep that rolling, or did you see something that was like, okay, like now I can just throw more money at it, or what was the kind of the driving factor that was like, all right, if I really ramp this up, I can make a lot of money with it.
it's a good question, and thinking back on that Q4, um, yeah, it was eye opening of how fast things moved. I remember in December one day, as I said, I did not do merchant fulfillment. I did it almost all FBA, but at that point, you know, Yeti was like the hot giftable item. They didn't have all the colors. It was just silver, I think, at that point. I don't even know if they had any colors, but maybe they had a white. I forget, but or maybe they're just starting with the colors. But you know, um, and at that point, I created a small little mastermind, and one of my buddies in the mastermind was like, he was clearing, I don't know, a couple thousand a day, selling these Yetis. He's like, you got to go get these Yeti cups. So then I started trying to order them online, and then eventually, I had a couple of large orders canceled because like, oh, look at that, they got 99 in stock. Let me order that, and then they canceled. But I actually got a bunch of them, and I remember my my friend was in town from Texas, and we were going to the zoo. And I think shortly before I left, I listed these things, and I think I had 100 or 200 of them. I listed them on Merchant Fulfilled. I'm like, oh, we'll Merchant Fulfill them. Went to the zoo and came back, and they were all sold.
Wow.
It sold like 150 in like 5 hours, and I was just like, one, it just showed the power of this, of like, holy cow, like how fast this can move. And also was like, oh shit, I now have to pack up 150 of these. And like, I had no idea what I was doing. So like, I had no boxes. Like, I was trying to find, boxes around the house. Like, it's just the little things that you don't really think about, especially as you grow. And now we just, buy stuff from
Were you
Box Tree
also
or
concerned that your price wasn't high enough when you sold that many that quick?
not really, because we were getting good margins on
Yeah.
them. So like, it's just, they were just flying. It was one of those things that like, I mean, it was like, I think it may have been number one, if not like number in the top 10
Wow.
in the home and kitchen category in December. So like, it was just moving insanely fast that like, you could just move that all in such a short period of time. I mean, if you could hold the buy box, we probably could move, 2,000 a day or something like that. I would guess, but
So
um,
your business always had an online component to it. Then it wasn't you just going into stores all the time like a lot of
yeah,
people.
yeah. I mean, pretty early on, as I said, when I first started, I did a little bit of the retail arbitrage. Um, but again, from the scalability with my schedule perspective, getting in the stores was not a big thing for me. It just didn't fit my schedule. As I said, Monday and Friday, I was, driving into the office slash taking a train. And, you know, I only had after 7 o'clock to really work. And in the weekends, I was trying to dedicate to the family. I would drag them to Toys R Us occasionally, which was a good family outing. But yeah, I personally was not doing a lot of RA. It was always OA. Um, as I've alluded to a few times here, that I was very frugal. So it's one of the things that skill set in me that I've had my whole life, because we just, when growing up didn't have, a lot of money. And then, as I, even started to get, a little bit of success in, my career, just trying to, reach towards that fire, that I just was always frugal. So it all made sense to me of like, okay, like, try to find this deal, like stack these coupons. Like it was just what I'd done my whole life. Like not buying a winter jacket for $80. No, I'm stacking all these coupons and getting it for $30. Like, so it just was, sort of meshed very well with my whole, background of, trying to figure out how to save a buck too. So,
Now were there
um,
cash back apps at this point?
yeah, cashback was a big thing. Gift cards were as well. I dabbled with that, especially because back in the day, you could get like, obviously, I talked about how I could buy the Sears gift cards and get an extra 10% cash back. But then you had like stores, places like Card Cash and Raise. Um, and I remember back in the day, Belk used to be one that I used to like because it would have like 21%, discount on the gift cards. And just a lot of stores were like over 10%. Again, a lot less competition at that point in time. Back in 2015, 2016. So, um,
Now, were you still chasing Ryan Grant's numbers at that point, or had you already gone on your own trajectory? And like, what were you doing? Q2, Q3 of 2016.
yeah, I mean, admittedly, at that point, we were still probably doing, you know, fairly small numbers. First of all, Q1 has always been I need to recover from Q4 type of situation. So, but I didn't do too much. I admittedly, I don't remember those days. I'm trying to see if I have my numbers up here, but I
I
don't have that. But
I know I had
um,
started in like August, and then my first Q4 going into it, I'm like, this is amazing. I'm going to be doing $100,000 months in January, and then you realize that that's not how sales
yes,
work in January and
it
February.
yeah, it's like in Q4, you're always waiting for it to hit. Like it just seems like people are talking about Q4 and it's not hitting, and it's not hitting, it's not hitting. And the next thing you know, it hits, and you're like, oh my god, and then it just stops, and it's like, what happened? But like January is pretty good because you have all the people using their gift cards, and I always say like it's the people that you know their significant other, mom, dad, whoever, they didn't buy them what they wanted for Christmas, so now they're going to go buy it for themselves or whatever because they've been waiting for 6 weeks for thinking they're going to get this gift that they didn't get, so they're going to buy it themselves. Between that and gift cards, January is usually pretty good, even without, and in particular because there's so many good deals in December, you're ramping up on inventory that
Oh yeah.
doesn't so your starting inventory value in January is pretty good. So January is usually pretty good, and then it'll slow down a little bit in February and March, and whatnot. So, um, but yeah, I mean, still was grinding away in 2016, trying to figure out how to, make it work. Um, and let me just see real quick here. Yeah. And it was a slow grind at that point in time, just trying to find different things, trying to expand our sourcing. At that point, it was like I was all Sears, just Sears, Sears, Sears. In particular, I had, I'd figured out pretty quickly on that, hey, Craftsman's I'm fine saying it now because I do not think it's a good I don't sell it anymore. I get, I think, lawyer letters for it now half the time anyway. But Craftsman was a good brand that you could source because it was, at that point I think it was still essentially a store exclusive for Sears and Kmart. um So you get good money on Target. And so I started sourcing there, and I really sort of that's really how I learned how to source. And this is what I always tell people. I would go every day and I would just source sears. That's all I would do. And I would I would look at all the Craftsman screwdrivers, and I would just go one by one and review every single one, find the different listings, and I'd see if it was profitable. And if it wasn't profitable, then either way, I would find software. It doesn't exist anymore. I even forget what it was called. And they have different ones. I think Visual Ping's one of them, but I would set alerts on Sears so that I would get an email when that item went on sale, because I would see and say, okay, has velocity on Amazon. It's not profitable now, but it will be profitable in some day. So I'd set an alert, and then after sourcing all the screwdrivers, you would see, hey, look, this same seller is on every damn listing. So that's when I started doing your storefront stalking, before storefront stalking was even really a thing. I mean, it was always a thing, I guess, but they didn't have tools to automate it. So I would click on that guy's store, and I'd search his store for Craftsman.
Now, are you
And then
doing this all through spreadsheets at this point, or are you keeping track of it in Keepa, or like how are you tracking all this?
well, all I would do is, I forget what the software was called, and it said it doesn't exist anymore. But I would go on this person's storefront, and there would be multiple Sears sellers, and I would switch a different day, and I'd find the ones that were profitable. Not profitable. I'd find anyone that had a good ranking, and I'd go into Sears, and then I would set an alert utilizing this third party software that would email me when Sears dropped the price, and I would just mark them all off. And in that way, every day I'd wake up to a bunch of emails of things that went on sale, and then I would buy them. And then obviously I'd also watch for the sales and whatnot. And that's what I did, all of 2015, and as I went into the 2016. But at that point, I'd figured out Sears, so it was, again, I probably sourced that store almost exclusively for 6 months. I did some Amazon flips. I always did Amazon flips, but did most of my sourcing at Sears, and then I started to try to add other stores, and trying to figure out other store cycles, because that's really one of the keys from my perspective was learning the store, learning the sales cycle, learning the sellers that sell it, and then being able to capitalize it on when those items are on sale. Even learning the tanking cycles are another thing, because you start to learn, okay, this is going to be good, but if I can't flip it quick, it's going to be bad for 2 months. But then it'll be good in a month. So you could hold the price. Back then, storage costs weren't that bad, so I would hold it there, if I needed to, and whatnot. And I think they had long-term storage fees, but they weren't bad. Um,
So at this
so yeah,
point,
I
were you
mean,
doing like $100,000 months, or like what was?
no,
Not yet.
no, I was doing, I was still probably sitting at 15 to 30K outside of Q4 that first year.
So you were still
Um,
having to work your 9 to 5, and
yeah,
then using this as supplement so that Melissa didn't have to go back to work.
exactly. Yeah, it was a little something. Um, you know, in 2016, I'd formed a mastermind. Or actually, it was in 2015. It was pretty early on. Again, I mentioned the guy that helped with the Yetis, and we worked together, and we really did not like, you know, the what do you want to call them? Like the gurus, like the people that were like selling all the stuff to the newbies. We just felt they were very disingenuous. A lot of the people out there, you know,
Were there a lot in the space at that point?
yeah, there was a decent amount of them, and like there was ones that like were caught like um faking sales screenshots and stuff, and like just stuff where like the one day he'd post a sales screenshot in July 80,000, and then the next day the July screenshot would be 75,000. Like somebody'd call him out on it, and like just there's a lot of, I'm not
It's
going to name any
awful.
names, but there was a lot of like stuff, and again, even like the guys at FBA Masters, and I like those guys, but it did seem a little, you know, I don't know what the right word is, but where they were just trying to convince everybody to buy flips when their motivation was the cash back that they were earning from it, that I'm not even sure they disclosed properly. Maybe they were, I don't know, but there's just a lot of stuff.
Disingenuous.
Yeah, and again, it's a while back, and maybe they were all doing on the up and up, but just some of it just felt like fake. So we'd started our own little Facebook group to build a little bit of an audience, and in 2016, and it definitely slowed my growth a little bit of you're focusing on building you know a well, not network, I guess, but building, a following, not necessarily of me, but, the four of us, there's five of us at the time, trying to build a group. And at that point in time, um, there's only one software. It was called an OA X-ray that could really like scan. And you would put it on, you would go to like a page and you'd click a button and it would search for stuff. And we'd had a developer that was in our group that said, look, I'm building something that will, you know, you can scan the whole site and spit out the results. And tactical arbitrage wasn't out at this point in time. So we were like, okay, we're going to be the first ones to the market. It was like OA Ninja had a cool name. And like, so that was part of like, hey, we'll build this community. That's the word I was looking for. Your community that we can then eventually, release the software. We're not going to do the guru BS. We're going to be truthful, share our truth, our true experiences instead of like, for better or worse,
Yeah.
just trying to be better than what we thought some of the people were out there. And don't get me wrong, there's plenty of people that, do it well. But again, at that point in time, we just felt like there was a lot of slimy people out there, charging, massive amount of money for different stuff and just, faking, again, people faking sales screenshots, all that stuff. So we started that community, and it definitely, I only have a little bit, I said my time was pretty limited, and it definitely sort of sidetracked me a little bit, but it also helped build a network, because really that is something that really can, help you. And you hear it all the time from your gurus and everybody, like, networking, you got to network, get share your stuff. You don't have to share,
Masterminds.
you don't have to share shit. You don't have to sit there and share if you don't want to, but go reach out to other people, like-minded people, and talk to them online. You don't have to share your story if you don't want to, but you certainly can reach out to people and try to find people that are in the similar area of you. But it did help me network. And again, I was big into Amazon flips, and we eventually created in 2016 we had created an Amazon flip group, um, and had some paid members into that. And at that time, I'd switched from my Oregon prep center to a prep center over in New Hampshire, from a recommendation of another seller, and it was going pretty well. And, the prep center started saying, hey, can you help us get some customers? So, I started helping promote them a little bit. And a lot of our, flip group, people that were in the flip group were, sending stuff to this prep center. And all of a sudden, the prep center stopped answering the phones and shipment stopped going out. And that was a bit of a, oh boy, what's going on? Especially because I'd vouched for this company, hey, well, you guys check this out. It's good. They're doing a really good job for me. You guys should use them too. Um, and we must have, I don't know if it went radio silence for a couple weeks,
Wow.
and just very little getting out, no response from the owner. They had an awesome sort of like, not the owner, but the person that ran the warehouse, essentially, was great. And all of a sudden she was like gone. And then every once in a while somebody would hear from her, and eventually like, I can't remember if she would complain about, at that point, I think at some point it became clear that she was no longer working there, and you couldn't get anybody else. And we were like, at some point, I know at this point, like we had, I think like a, again, this was Facebook time. I think like a Facebook Messenger chat or something of like all these people that like I knew that were using this prep center, and we're sort of like communicating of, what are we going to do? And I know we called the police at some point. We call it like somebody had figured out office complex and what was the company next door and called, and then like, talking to the owners of the business next door, and they're like, yeah, we heard the two owners, outside screaming and yelling, and nobody's there anymore. Like, we're just hearing like all this stuff. Like, I had a random person message me. I still like never gave me any other feedback, but just said like, this guy's a criminal. You need to get your stuff out. Like, it just was like weird. And I was like, at some point, I was, I told Melissa, I'm like, I think I need to go up there. In the Philly area. So New Hampshire's like, 8 hours away. And again, I still, at this point, we had two little kids, and I'm like, I think I gotta go up there. Like, I'm like, I vouched for this company. All these people are, have their stuff in there, and we're at least drivable. I'm like, I got to figure out what's going on and see if we can get the inventory out, whatnot. So,
How much money was
and
like tied up in there of your money?
so for what it's worth, I had luckily got a huge shipment out right before um the they'd started getting non-responsive, and I was pretty quick of like something seems off, and I was communicating to everybody else, but I think other people were just like, I have to buy. So they were still buying. And I had slowed down and shifted to our house and just took a little break when it was starting, whereas other people were still going. So at that point, I might have had, 5, 10 grand worth, I think, and probably even closer to 5 grand. Like, it wasn't like massive, massive amounts, but, it still was enough, and it still was inventory. And again, from my perspective, I vouched for this, and now I got all these people like, what's going on? So I wanted to go, try to take care of it. So eventually, I think it might have been, I don't know if it was the first time we left the kids alone for a long time or whatnot, but I said, Mom, Dad, can you watch the boys for the day? And I took off from work, and me and Melissa, I was like, do you want to come? Like, I'm like, this is not exactly going to be an exciting event, but do you want to come? So we drove up after work, stayed in a hotel, I think somewhere near there, and then we ended up meeting one other seller. He flew from Texas,
Wow.
and we met him, um, and he rented a U-Haul, and we met them at the prep center at like 7 in the morning or whatever, and we got there and nobody's answering, and but we could see somebody was in there, and I forget how we finally got them to answer, but it was this, it must have been a girl. I'm not even sure she was in her 20s. She must have weighed like 70 pounds, and she's in this place all by
Not
herself.
not a warehouse worker then.
Not somebody that seemed to have a lot of experience with warehouse, and there was packages everywhere. I'd never seen so many packages at that point in time in my life.
Were they outside or were they inside at
They
least?
were all inside. They were all inside, but it was there was not, there was not much there. And at some point she talked to us, but she wouldn't let us in, and then we're like, we started to get, again, being polite, but getting a little bit like, we are here to take our stuff, like, we need to get our product. It's clear you guys aren't shipping it, especially if you're the only one here. you know um we need to get this out, and eventually, I can't, eventually I think she called the owner, and the owner agreed to let us in or whatever. And I get it. Like, who are we? Why are we showing up? But we weren't announcing ourselves. Like,
No.
no, like, this was a surprise visit.
Yeah, they never
We
would
got
have
our
showed up
U-Haul.
if you did.
Yeah. I can't even remember at that point in time if we had fully negotiated with the other prep center that we were moving stuff from. But, because lucky enough, there literally was a prep center, like, they must have been like 5, 10 miles apart. So this place was called We Ship USA or something like that. And we moved to Prime Ship, Prime Ship Zero, I think it's called, Prime Zero Prep. Yeah. And they're still around, and they were one of the first ones to actually do this. Um,
And that's when you found out that that person that you were communicating with moved to that prep center.
yeah. So at some point during that day, and I think the 70-pound girl started to trust a little bit. She started to tell us a little bit more. And yeah, eventually the um the main warehouse person that was running the show, who was awesome, I evidently got in a fight with the owners or whatever and left. And she was also happened to be the cousin, or she was somehow related to the owner at the other warehouse, because we started moving stuff over there, and I think we saw her over there, and she actually came back with us from Prime Ship. What is it? Prime Ship Prep or whatever, the Prime Zero Prep. That's what it is. Came back with us from there to the We Ship, and was helping us get stuff,
Oh wow.
load stuff up. And I mean, we spent all day like just loading everything we could, trying to get everybody. Like, obviously we got our stuff, but that was probably a load or two, and then it was just trying to get everybody, like, we were messaging them, okay, where's your stuff, what's your name, where are you at, let's try to get everything out
Yeah, because
that we
imagine
could.
that they're ordering it under their business name. You don't necessarily know what their business name was. You're just
Exactly,
just
yeah, like I
yeah.
didn't know where everything was, and and then there was just some people that, I mean, they just had massive amounts of stuff, and like we were doing Amazon flips, and it was a lot of the flip group, so you saw a lot of the same stuff. I'm like, oh, I remember posting that, and it was, it was quite an event, of trying to get everything out of there, um, and just really something that I can't stress enough of, that was sort of a learning curve of, like, you really need to try to figure out how to validate these sort of suggestions. And somebody, you know, recommended these guys. Now, in retrospect, maybe I shouldn't have trusted that guy, especially some of the history that I eventually learned from that guy. But like, it's hard, like, and it just, you got to be careful and don't always go with the cheapest. I don't know if those guys were cheapest. I don't even remember why I went with these guys, but, and for what's worth, they were great. And all of a sudden they sucked. So, I mean, there was no way there. Essentially, the girl that was working there was the nanny for the owner. So it was just the nanny hanging out there, and she knew how to do it, and I think she was building shipments, but she was, one person that couldn't do heavy lifting, and she was literally the only one that worked that whole day. And packages were the QPS kept coming, like they probably had 48 hours until they wouldn't have been able to take any more stuff. Like
Wow.
it was insane.
I mean, unfortunately, that's how a lot of businesses work. And I mean, one of the prep centers I use is their husband wife team. They work out of their house, but they send things out in 24 hours. So I love them, but I also am cautious on how much I'm sending out because it's if it does get stuck, I don't want to end up with all my eggs in one basket and that be everything that I'm sending. But I can't beat the speed of them. Now the shipping prices are getting much more expensive, so it gets a little bit trickier. But yeah, I mean, you hear a lot of nightmare stories about prep centers, and at least your stuff is inside. I've heard of stuff where they drive by and like stuff soaking
Yeah,
wet
it's sitting
outside in
outside.
the yard. So at least we're fortunate you're able to recover a lot of that stuff, and I'm sure that prep center loved you after that because you brought them all the clients.
Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, they were so busy because they were, um, yeah, I said they were like the first ones in there, and then they were in tight with a lot of the, um, the marketers, whatever, gurus, whatever you want to call them. So like at times they had waiting lists, like, which was
Wow.
good. Like, and that's one of the reasons I liked about them. They were slow, at that point in time, but they were upfront about being slow. And when you submitted, like, you had to submit your batch, it literally would tell you, okay, this is how many hours until, you know, like, estimated time, and they stayed pretty good to it. So like, I didn't stay with them too long. I did eventually move on, and they just had a lot of clients and were busy. And this was, again, we're talking 2016, so they're still standing, right? They're still around, so they're doing something right. And I've heard a lot of good things with them. Actually, my buddy, the buddy that I met, the guy that I met at the prep center, unfortunately passed away, but his business partner, um, is still using Prime Zero Prep. So like
Oh wow.
he still has like positive things to say about them, after all these years. So I ended up switching away. I mean, I did, like, I think it wasn't until I think my eighth or ninth prep center that I finally found one that I'm like, okay, this one, you know,
Good
this one
grief.
works. This one hits what I need. And again, especially when you're early on, I realize you have probably unrealistic expectations and you want everything to be super quick. And of course, you're the little guy. Like, so
Yeah.
like they got, some massive sellers sending them boatloads in my little stuff. And I'm just a bit of a pain in the ass, when I'm don't know what I'm doing. So I switched a few different times, until I finally found, you know, the one that works, for us. But um, yeah, it was a crazy story, and it took a little while to rebound. And I think that was probably around the summer of 2016, and then we rolled into Q4 of 2016, and that was when Q4. And now it's like, okay, now it's your second Q4, and it's okay, now about that velocity, okay, you can really go a little bit crazier, and you can buy a little bit bigger, and um prepare for it a little bit more. So that was the first time that you know I really pushed it, and October starting to ramp up a little bit, um, and November as we started to get closer. And I think it was right around Black Friday where I just went nuts ordering stuff. And at that point, like I had a mix of sending stuff, uh, Prime Zero Prep, my prep center, and sending to the house. And in particular, anything that I was like, okay, this is a hot toy that, isn't gonna, you know, isn't gonna hold price. I don't want to send to the prep center. Anything that I want shipped quickly, I'd send to my property, my place. I'd prep them, and try to get them out the next day. And I just went so nuts, buying stuff with the deals. I think in particular Black Friday, it was like probably like the week after Thanksgiving, and I came home and like I couldn't even get in because the boxes are everywhere. And Melissa's like, how are we prepping these things? Like, what's the plan here, Jeff? I'm like, I don't really have a plan. These were good deals. What if you want me to turn down the deal? So at that point, I think that night I posted something on Facebook, like, in our local town Facebook, anybody looking for, work. And, somebody responded and I talked to her, and she was working her own day job, but looking for some extra holiday money. And we came up to agreement that she would show up my house at 9 o'clock. So I would get home from work. I'd put our kids to bed. Um, or at that, yeah, because I'd put both of our kids to bed. And then once I got them to sleep, I would go into our garage and work out of the garage. I guess one step that I sort of missed was in early 2016, after the first Q1, we took our Q4 money and we put it into finishing our garage, into we added insulation, we added a heater / air conditioning unit, and we added sort of some like prep areas so that we could work out of there. Because, working on the dining room table and dining and the kitchen table was not really working very well and was just running out of space. So we did that. So I would meet, this individual
Especially
that
around the holidays. I mean, your wife would be furious with boxes
yes,
all
yeah.
over the dining room
Uh,
table.
so this person, again, it was probably the week after Thanksgiving, would show up at our house, go into the garage, and we start working, 9 o'clock until I think she usually stayed like 9 to 12, 9 to 11 at least, but sometimes 9 to 12, and sometimes later, helping me prep and get things ready to go out for the next day. I honestly, I don't even remember how I got them out though. I don't know if she dropped them off, I dropped them off, wife dropped them off, but um, you know, and that's where the first person that started working, and we were just and she would see the stuff I was ordering, and the next thing you know, I'd get like a text from her. Hey, this item's at Target. Do you want this? So she was, finding inventory. I'm like, this person's fantastic. So I'm like, okay, sure, buy that. And eventually, I think I got her a credit card. Like, I don't know if it was that Q4, but later. But um, and again, all out of the garage. And I think I did see if I have that one written down. No, I don't think I do, but I think I did like 120. I do have it written down. 126,000 that December. And like that was just, I was working nonstop, even working a little bit more on the weekends. So the weekends usually were we'd go to Toys R Us and, you know, spend the time. The kids would wander around Toys R Us with Melissa and I to go buy stuff. And I'd go out like Thursday nights for their 10%, whatever it was, the 10%, um, 10% days or whatever. You got 10% off for using the credit cards on Thursdays. That was also the year of the Hatchimals, if I recall, where, there was a couple of weekends where we got hot tips that, the Toys R Us might have been stocking Hatchimals, and we'd go there in the morning and wait for it to open and, end up finding there's no actual Hatchimals or whatever. But we did really good finding them at Barnes and Nobles. I remember I found a boat, like I think I found like 80 of them I worked in Philly, uh, you know, um, and I got them, ordered them for pickup, and then went and picked them up. I think I had Melissa drive into the city to pick me up as I drug the Hatchimals out or whatever. But that was the first year of really like hunting hot toys. At that point, you were able to buy them at retail and sell them above retail.
How are you
And one,
explaining to your kids that you're buying toys and not giving them to them?
yeah, that was always a hard thing, but they always liked, they always managed to get something themselves. So,
I had to tell my kids, I'm like, Santa's asked me to help with getting these other kids these toys. He needs my help with this, and so he'd come in here and try to help pack stuff up and think that he's helping Santa out. So that was how I got around that. But he still wanted all the things.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah, so that first, set, I did 126, which was like to me it was amazing, and it sort of reached that like goal that like when I saw Ryan Grant like doing the 100,000, like oh man, like, and that was really like I think that was the first one like clicked of like, hey, I could potentially make this work, on my own. But not only at that point, there was a guy, he went by Harvey Specter, and he you know, somebody had posted in our sourcing simplifiers group like you know, I think he was trying to get to like 400,000 for December or whatever. And, he posted his sales screenshot. It was like a 395. He's like, am I going to get it in December or something? And next, you know it, everybody's starting to post their screenshots. And, you know, there's some, I mean, even 400,000 was like, oh my God, that how did somebody do that? I worked nonstop to get to 120, 126. And then
so
Harvey
Harvey
Specter.
Specter's why at the beginning of the month there's all orange bars all over Instagram and Twitter and everything now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, and I think he dropped a 1.5 million, I think, in December alone. And I was just like, oh my God, that's insane. How did he do that? But at the same point, I'm like, yo, if he can do it, why can't I do it? Like, nothing against Harvey or not against anybody. That's just always been my sort of stance of if somebody can figure out how to make it work, why can't I? And Harvey was smart. He knew this stuff better than anybody that I knew. He was, an RA guru. He had more Hatchimals than any retail store, I'm pretty sure. Like he had like every Hatchimal, that existed. And he was, I think, he did very, very well because it wasn't just, empty, orange bars. These were profitable orange bars, very profitable orange
Is he
bars.
still a seller? Do you know?
I honestly don't know. I've lost contact with him, and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, he was always the guy that would post some sick stuff out there, and just like, oh my God, how did he do that? And that was definitely I think between us doing 125 or 126 and seeing him, it was okay. I can make this work, but how do I make it work, and how do I get to a point that I can leave, the day job?
All right, so we're in 2017. You've now gone through this whole process where you've had this for 2 years. You have a proof of concept. You're now getting in with trying to figure out if you're going to be leaving your 9 to 5 or when that starts to make sense. I think right now is probably a good point to wrap up the first part of the series here. And then we'll continue with the next portion of when you get into having your largest Q4, moving away from your 9 to 5, and then all the things that ramp back up to the 25 million.
Sounds like a plan. Thanks,
All right.
Joe.
Appreciate you being on.
Awesome.